Okay, buenos días a todos. And I'd like to welcome the Deputy Chief of Mission from the Russian Embassy, who's here to, share the history and talk about what we learned. I wish sometimes that countries were like people, that they get smarter with age. But sometimes countries don't learn from the past, and they forget the past, and they repeat the past. There are a lot of lessons from the Cuban Missile Crisis that I believe that people in the State Department should be studying today. We should be learning from the Cuban Missile Crisis, but there is not enough emphasis put on what we can learn and what we can apply today. We learned from, at least I learned from Michael Dobbs' book about Fidel Castro's telegram to Secretary General Khrushchev. And as you well know, he was asking for a preemptive strike. And we know that now, and it's an incredible thought that in 1962, had he been given the opportunity, he would have had a preemptive strike on the U.S. So I think it shocked everyone, including the Soviet Union, and you think about that and wonder, what does that mean for our policy with Iran? What does that mean for our policy for North Korea? It is very, very difficult to allow a declared enemy to have nuclear weapons. And that is a premise that we talk about today. But you think about, compare the difference between what President Obama says today and what John F. Kennedy said 50 years ago. Kennedy said, you do this and it's a war against the U.S. And today, you hear, don't cross the line, we're getting impatient, we're going to draw a line in the sand. What do they call the red line? Yes, we have a red line, but, people aren't. They're not taking this seriously. And the idea that, as Jaime mentioned, weakness is provocative. That's something that Donald Rumsfeld used to say. So any show of weakness will attract an enemy's attention. The lesson, so there's one lesson from 62. You cannot allow an enemy to have nuclear weapons. It's not a matter of not wanting to or hoping. You can't allow it. And what is the implication of that for Iran and North Korea? We have economic sanctions on Iran. It doesn't mean to be making a difference. When a leader, a dictator, is about to get their hands on a nuclear weapon, nothing will stop them. There's nothing that can substitute for the amount of power and status that it will give them. So I wouldn't expect Iran or North Korea to change on the basis of economic sanctions. Cuba had economic sanctions. They lost their sugar quota in July 1960. They still went on with this. I mean, the possibility of having a nuclear weapon is probably the maximum dream of every dictator. Insults back and forth, threats went back and forth, and it wasn't until the naval blockade that Kennedy got their attention. And it wasn't before the idea that you get close to the blockade and then we have a problem, and then we're at war. So I think about that and say, well, what does that mean for Iran? That we had to do that. Are these sanctions going to be okay still? These threats and the red line and, just going back and forth? I don't think so. So we need to translate what we have learned from 1962, analyze that in the sense of what that means for today. If history repeats itself, we will find out once again that sanctions are not enough, that leaders have to have the will to show strength and to, as Jaime said, to convey the willingness to use strength. So when Kennedy put the blockade out there, that was a sign. We have not had any signs. We don't make signs anymore. We're just talking and using using CNN. So I wish the U.S. government paid more attention to 1962. And how can we let so many years go by and almost ignore what has happened and what is happening in Cuba? We were up in arms with Gaddafi for 41 years and Saddam Hussein 31 years. I think we even forgot that Castro's been there for 53. So it is remarkable. So Fidel Castro is now dying, and I hope that we have available all the documentation in Cuba. Although I have nightmares about the shredding machines in Havana right now, just really getting rid of everything they can, which would be a real shame for history. Because there's a lot of documents, a lot of classified documents, a lot of lessons that we can take that will hopefully prevent another 1962 in the future. The good news is, while the State Department doesn't do it, and they do it, but maybe not as much as we'd like, that we have Jaime Shuzliki and Jose Acel and Brian Littell and this whole institute to look at these issues. And it's because of the Institute for Cuban and Cuban-American Studies that we don't forget these things, that we have an archive and we know what happened, and we constantly are compiling documents so that the history is absolutely clear. And thanks to Jaime and the Institute, our history as Cubans will not be forgotten. Because you'd hate to see, things destroyed, things disappear, and not having history be as clear as it should be. It's the same way it happened in other countries. It's the same way it happened after other deaths of leaders, whether it be Mao, whether it be Stalin. There was enough documentation that history can be recorded. I hope it's the same here. But I want to thank Jaime, his staff, for being committed to the mission of ensuring that Cuban history is clear and that nothing gets lost in Cuban history, and that when the day comes, we can retell the Cuban history to all our next generations and future generations exactly what happened. I hope you enjoyed today. This is going to be I think we will all learn from this. And I would just encourage you, think about history, of course. Think about what happened in 1962. But the real challenge is think about how what happened 50 years ago impacts what is happening today, and what does it teach us about how to deal with the world today. And ironically, once again, the answers are in Cuba. And in this case, it's 1962. So thank you for being here, and enjoy the day. And again, thank you for your support of the Institute. One day it'll be this institute that is telling the real history of what happened in Cuba over the last 53 years. Thank you.
Thank you.